It's a small paper, so even if I want it pretty dark, I want to be careful how much. I don't want to just dump a gallon of watercolor on there. So I'm just starting a little gingerly, just see how it reacts, and then you're off and running. And it's wet enough where all this should stay wet. You have to work a little bit quickly if you want to do it before it sets up. And also you can you can use these little spray misters to help it to run. Of course, when you do that, if it gets into here, that's going to flow in there. Now you may want a little of that, but I don't want to lose all the definition of it. Just some of it. At first, I'm just staying pretty close to the script. I'm defining those flowers. And Payne's Gray is I think it's a watercolorist's delight, that steely blue-gray. It's always been one of my favorite colors, just to throw in some background, and probably a lot of other painters too. But you can see, just touch it and it runs right around the flower. The blossom is dry, so it's not going to run into that unless you really drip it in there on purpose. And it's a small watercolor, so these bamboo brushes are good. They've got a pretty big brush, but they got a real small tip, so they're versatile brushes. You can get in there and go from a big broad stroke like that to a little tiny detailed stroke. And there are times that tip is still too big, so the script brushes, are good. If you have some of these little stems and things, sometimes you just got to go with a very small brush. And here's a little turquoise too. Let me throw a little turquoise on it just for the fun of it. And you got to be careful when you're working around some areas. You don't want to accidentally go across it. If you do, just quickly get a clean wet brush and try to take it off. And if you're quick enough, usually you can save some areas. Okay, maybe throw a little bit of green in there with this, just to add a little bit of the greenery to the floral genre. Then you can get a little lighter up here, add a little water. Doesn't all have to be intense and dark. You can add some other colors and some, weaken it with a little bit of water, lighten it up. can easily mix watercolors. All of a sudden you get new colors blending together. So part of the fun of watercolor, the way it just works itself together. Maybe a little darker down here. Around that. And you can let it run a little while it's still wet. Just have a little fun with it, just play with it. Let that run down there a bit, maybe. And you don't want to get in there too much and paint again. You can let it run, but if it's still really wet, you can get in there and pull it a little. But if that's drying and you get in there, it'll create a little bit of a explosion. Now, sometimes those look kind of nice. They can look like little background leaves or something, and but you just got to be aware of what's going to happen when you get back into a watercolor while it's kind of semi-wet and dry. And I do want some of that to happen when I wet some of these down with some light gray. I want it to bleed in there a little bit. So I'm gonna make these blossoms white, but I'll have a little bit of blue-gray color. If I want it to be a true gray and not really too much blue, I want it to kind of stand out, so more of a gray. You can use Payne's gray, and then you could add a little bit of black to it, or you could put a little bit of brown in it, and it'll be just more of a neutral gray. I'm running out of mixing space here. The brown and the blue will make a little more of a neutral gray or black. But we want to be real light on this gray because these are white and they just want some real light gray shadows. And then as I put that across there, that's going to bleed out into it. Let's see what that's. So I'm purposely letting that touch there. That's going to push that out a bit. And you lose control of that. But you're just looking at the timing. If it's too wet, it'll push too far. And see, that's starting to create a little bit of chaos there, which is what I want some of that. And then if your gray areas look a little too gray, now remember it's gonna dry lighter. That pigment will soak in, but if something looks too gray, just clean the brush, make it damp, and see, you can pull some of that off. You got a little time to play and work with it. Now see, that's exploding out there a little bit. It's kind of attractive, I think. Just you look at the timing, and you can tell just by how wet or dry it is. I knew, okay, that's going to push a little. That was not pushing as much, so I'm keeping some definition and letting it kind of have its way a little bit. Those edges, maybe, if I want to soften those, you just hit them a few times. And then maybe while that's still wet, we'll put a little bit of a raw sienna button in the middle, a little pollen area. Let's see if that's, you don't want to get that too big. You can add a little yellow to it, maybe the yellow ochre. The part that those bees and butterflies go after where the pollen is. See, that's moving a little. Now also, something I almost forgot, you can take the edge and get a few stems without painting. What these are really nice for is you do them quick, they're spontaneous, and that's dried too much. Maybe one over here. You don't want to overdo those though. You can get kind of crazy and get too many stems. Okay, so that's moving a little, spilling out there. Now this is pretty wet, so I'm going to throw a little gray in there. It's a little dark. So now when I hit that, that's going to really push. And I'm just taking a chance that the timing's right and it won't just push out too far, but it might. If that's the case, just let it go. And with that light gray, gives that white some dimension. You don't want it to look just like a stenciled on white spot, although that doesn't look horrible. I just like to add a little bit of dimension to it. And just a little cross here and there is all you need. Just a little touch of it. Those small ones, so just a little tiny touch. And then you go for that little center. So that's pretty wet, so I don't need to make a big spot there because that's going to move pretty good. And there, right there. And if that's too wet, you might want to wait a minute. But it needs a little centerpiece, again, to give it some dimension. If you want to distinguish those blossoms a bit, you can go in with a little bit of shadow in there. I might not do much to those, just let those be a little more white. They're so small, you could just make them disappear almost without trying to. If you wanted to stir it up a little, work that edge a little more, and then drop a little more water in there. Now I'll give that a little time. That'll start bleeding out just a bit. Here we're getting some movement, some bleeding. Now I remember in college and painting class, they taught you don't get into an adjacent area where that's semi-dry and that's wet. It'll create those explosions. Some people call them cauliflowers. But you know, it's good to be aware that you want to avoid that in transparent watercolor. But you know, when you get out of school and you're just doing your own thing with the art, you can try different things. And to me, some of those aren't mistakes. They're just creating some movement now. And who's to say what's best? If I should have kept that real clean, or I just see it as some background, some little leaves. And speaking of leaves, we could put a few little marks in there. Kind of get some green, maybe some yellow ochre together, and maybe some raw sienna. Make it a little olive green. I don't want it all that strong, so putting in more water. And then that's a little too much. So here's where you can just throw in a few little leaves, get a little bit of green in there. They don't have to be perfect. Just a few spots here and there. It's usually good enough. Just adds a little to gives it a little more interest to look at. Fills up the space. And you can kind of play around, maybe some of that warmer color. Maybe to separate some of those blossoms, just throw some of that in. Kind of like that. Just gives it a little more color here and there. If you want that to run a little, just pull it off. Okay, well, that went pretty easy. It's funny with painting and watercolors, sometimes they flow easy and sometimes they fight you. But you never know what people are like, though. The ones that fight you the most and you think you lost them, sometimes that's the first thing somebody likes. Just a little touch of a little more yellow around there. Get that give it a little more color. Maybe a little yellow up there. Not too much. Stop with that. That's just about it. There's a point where you just, if it's just about finished looking, then watercolor especially, if it looks about finished, then it's time to quit. And acrylic and oil tend to just get richer the more you paint them. I'll do a lot of layering on acrylics and more time in them. Watercolor tends to look a little crisper and nicer when you give it up a little sooner. So let me sign this. And that's it. Let me get a nice strong color to sign it. I just looked for a spot that will work. I usually sign on the left, but that's down in there, so I'll try right in there. This one's a little tight, so hope that's not too wet around it. Goes down a little more. Okay, I'll let that pigment soak in a little, and I'll finish it off with a hairdryer. I don't like to get on it with a hairdryer immediately. I like to let that dry naturally just for a bit, and we'll see what that'll look like with a mat on it. Let me see if I have a mat. Yeah, here's a little mat. Mat's a little small, but I have to cut off some of it, but that'll be okay. So that was just some Arches paper, 140 pound. So anyway, thanks for watching Stott's Fine Art. We'll talk to you later.